Before we get to the reviews, just wanted to spend a few minutes discussing Don West. Mike TNA was the one that put out the notice earlier on Friday that Don West had lost his battle with brain lymphoma. He had initially announced that he had brain cancer in June of 2021, and there was this huge campaign and rallying around Don West to help with his medical costs and such, and then had announced that the cancer was in remission. It was great news, and then sadly the cancer returned, and it just seems like he has been through a hell of a fight throughout this year. Jeff Jarrett had mentioned that he had just spoken to him a few days ago, and like Don West couldn't even communicate with him, and Jarrett knows him as well as anybody in the industry, stating that it was, conflicting emotions, that he's, of course, saddened by his loss, but at the same time knowing this guy is not suffering anymore. Like brain cancer is just, is the worst.
And Jarrett, who lost his wife to cancer as well.
Very much. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, he was only 59 years old, very young in the grand scheme of things, but somebody that synonymous with TNA and Impact Wrestling. He was there on the very first broadcast when it was a 3-man booth with TNA and Ed Ferrara, who was only there a short time. And as popular as Don West became as a figure, like he was a very polarizing commentator at the beginning because he was rough around the edges. He was not everyone's cup of tea, but over time, like his enthusiasm and energy, it's such a parallel to Pat McAfee, where I think there was similar when Pat McAfee first showed up on those NXT panels. I think there was a lot of like resistance to Pat McAfee, and now it's, I won't say universal praise, but it's pretty solid praise that Pat McAfee receives. And it was the same. Don West just became your favorite uncle that you were watching wrestling with, who was so over the top, and he got guys over through that enthusiasm. And him and TNA, they just became the voices of TNA. And it was like two friends watching wrestling every week, and they were such different broadcasters, but it was one of those chemistry issues that just, it worked. It just clicked with these two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. As is the case, I think whenever this happens, I have a feeling we'll look back on Don West's style that maybe at the time was a lot more polarizing, but I think we'll probably look back and really understand how maybe grateful we probably should have been for the fact that we had somebody who had such a professional enthusiasm about him that was able to lay that talent towards a fledgling professional wrestling product. I definitely feel like he had a real ability and a gift, and most of all, to me, dedication towards studying the product and being very familiar, so that the enthusiasm felt genuine and that it didn't just feel like a guy trying to sell you something. Of course, he could very well do that as well.
He was very good at that.
Yeah, but from what I could gather, was a bit of an outsider when it came to the professional wrestling scene. Started off maybe more well known for his QBC work, but nonetheless put in the effort to know this product, in and out, and it came through in the commentary.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure many people familiar with his work that predated TNA when he was at the Shop at Home network, and he just became like this cult celebrity in this interesting world where he was just the over-the-top salesman that could sell you baseball cards, Beanie Babies, like to the point that he was spoofed on SNL by Will Ferrell in 96 and 97. And I don't know if it was Vince Russo who first reached out to him or if it was Jeff Jarrett. I've heard both of who initially reached out to Don West to try and do pro wrestling. But, he came in to do TNA and still did sports radio during those first few years with TNA all the way up until 2008. And then in 2009, that's when Taz came over and they worked Don West out of the booth and they did a turn on Mike TNA, which everyone hated at the time, that they were breaking this duo up. But the turn, I put the clip in my story today, man, Don West was, for a guy that had never done an angle before or anything at that level, man, was he great when he turns on Mike TNA. It was a really great segment, but his role as a manager was just, it was not going to have legs attached to it. And he ended up, having various roles on and off camera, and then eventually left TNA in 2012, came back to work with them in the Anthem era, and the last I saw him was at that Starcast, the very first one at All In. He was there for that as well. I know we had him on the Law, and he was just a lot of fun to have on and just deal with him as well. And you can just see all the tributes to him. He was just one of those guys that just seemed to leave such a positive impression on so many people. It's a very sad story when he first announced it, that, you know, it was very unfortunate. Like, that's just an awful disease to have to contend with for that amount of time. So rest in peace to Don West.
I think as a broadcaster, as an announcer, as a presenter, you can fake interest in a subject, you can fake knowledge in a subject, but you can't fake passion for a subject. And so Don West was a guy who, when he was first announced, I was kind of like, I don't know about this QVC home shopping network guy, but he was the kind of guy that made you invested in what was going on because he was so hyped. You know, every time there was an Amazing Red match, Don West made you think Amazing Red was the best wrestler on planet Earth. And, you know, you can't fake that. That's not something that you can put on. And so, like, yeah, Don West, as well as, you know, Barry Jackson, who we lost last year, I believe, you know, those were kind of the voices of Impact, along with Mike Tenay, that kind of got me hooked, not only as a fan, but also as somebody who pays attention to commentators. And I thought Don West and Mike Tenay were this really weird team, but they really worked. And you know, he'll be missed. So RIP to the good brother Don West and his family and his friends. He definitely made an impact, no pun intended, even though I'm sure he's in heaven laughing at that pun and trying to sell St. Peter 2 for $5 on some halos, because Don West was nothing if not a salesman. So we got to respect that brother tonight.
We got a Don Ross factory. Dude, I was watching some of those clips today, and man, he was just outstanding.
Selling knives and kitchen utensils and pots and pans. Like, dude was great, man. Like, I know he wasn't a lot of people's cup of tea when he first started in TNA, but you can't fake that enthusiasm that he had for that company.
No, and I think he won over just about everybody. Like, I mean, you know, commentary is something very subjective to people, but I think, you know, most people, it was like Don West became like a signature part of the show. And, you know, it was just such a natural friendship that came across with Tenay and Don West. Like, it didn't feel like these were two guys that, like, they had that relationship that extended on air. They had a tremendous chemistry. And for me, it was like that turning point that I wrote in my story today was that Amazing Red match. And he's on the booth, go Red, go. And just, you know, we talk about Excalibur today, but when Don West would run down the pay-per-view the next day or the next week, I mean, it was like a highlight of the show. It was just Don West hitting it up to 15 on the Richter scale and just getting you pumped for the disciples of the new church next week. I mean,
yes, Don West, and this is to this man's credit. Don West sold me on so many terrible disciples of the new church matches, so many terrible Ron and Don Harris matches, so many terrible Jeff Jarrett King of the Mountain matches. But that's a testament to his ability as a broadcaster. Like, he brought you into the circus tent that was TNA at the time. And I think,
and someone distinctly TNA too, Nate.
Yes.
Like, this was not a guy that had like the prior runs. It's like he was someone that you instantly identified as, this is TNA. That it was a fresh voice in the wrestling space, even if you had, you know, pre-existing knowledge of his non-wrestling work.
And him and Tenay played against each other so perfectly, because I think there was something to Don West that doesn't work if he's not with somebody as kind of universally respected and, you know, the consummate broadcaster that Mike Tenay was. Like, I think they played off of each other so well. And later on in his TNA run, you saw Don West start to get a little bit more knowledgeable, and you saw Mike Tenay start to get a little bit more loose. And I think that's a testament to their friendship and to their broadcast pairing. So yeah, I didn't think we were going to get on this super long tangent about Don West, man, but you brought up a lot of feelings, John, of my fandom of TNA. And that's kind of one of the things that brought you and I closer together, is arguing about the idiosyncrasies, I'll put it that way, of total nonstop action wrestling. And Don West was certainly a big part of that.